Mahoraga is the ultimate Shikigami, and Megumi gets to summon Mahoraga because the 10 Shadows is the quintessential cursed technique of JJK. There are lots of ways to counteract Gojo's infinity, and the same goes for any other ability he has. But what makes him the strongest is that people don't get control over what abilities they're born with. You don't choose your cursed technique. You're lucky if you're born with one, and that only matters if you're lucky enough to be born a sorcerer. And while sorcerers can use cursed energy manually, technique effects are too intricate to replicate or too inefficient to maintain, so the top sorcerers tend to use their manual control more to separate and rearrange pieces of their techniques to use in different ways. For the most part, their movesets are limited by how their bodies are built to naturally let them apply cursed energy, and Gojo's automatic defense lets him block almost every type of hazard, while in the time it takes someone to find a way to work around it, he can just as easily shuffle the activation circuits to hit you with a lethal combination. Gojo was born with a complex curse technique engraved in his brain and special organs that work really well together in a world where sorcerers are rare enough and hard enough to control the births of that for the span of human history, everyone's had to treat the appearances of specific abilities as miracles and just do what they can to preserve or work around them. The world is balanced by saying that anyone can be born with ridiculous power, but the abilities we already see, based on their various odd concepts, are rare enough, and you get what you get, so you game the system by controlling good powers when they do show up, and then making the most of however what you get your hands on is structured. You could counteract any technique with a tailored enough power to undermine it, but the world's power dynamics are stable because nobody can give themselves techniques on command or apply their cursed energy freely. That was why something that comes close, the ability to manifest any phenomena the user finds funny, was so terrifying to Kenjaku. It could undermine any existing technique or strategy Kenjaku had prepared. So it would be world-breakingly rare for someone to be naturally born with a technique around the ridiculously specific concept of countering Satoru Gojo. And since even the big three families and Kenjaku don't understand the world enough to control what techniques their descendants are born with, while there can be powers that apply cursed energy in specific enough ways to cancel Gojo's abilities, nobody is realistically going to be born with one. The same goes for curses, because while they come from people's fears, their techniques are only fitting byproducts, so you can't directly engineer a curse's technique by directing a bunch of people's fear. And based on the limits of the cursed spirits we've seen, no cursed based on a normal fear is going to develop a technique specific or strong enough to counteract something on the level of Gojo. Shikigami are special though, because their bodies and techniques are conjured from someone else deliberately using cursed energy. Unlike a curse, the body of a Shikigami is formed and maintained by someone's technique. And rather than an actual creature that needs complex anatomy to survive, it's more like a relay or a medium for an ability that can also act as an extra fighter to gang up on a target. So 90% of its structure is designed for its usefulness to the sorcerer, and the rest is to hold it together. Which means, if everyone's techniques are normally limited in what they do to a single concept or theme, a Shikigami user could potentially have a technique that expands the number of things they can do, because its theme is that it's a template that lets them conjure entire creatures that can then branch out into their own specialties. In theory, you could have a technique that lets you create custom Shikigami that can do whatever you want, but once again, the problem is that this is too rare, which is why most Shikigami techniques are limited to one special theme for the Shikigami or have lots of conditions to summon them. And you can't create special Shikigami, ones with special abilities, without a technique because of how much detail their structures would need to have. Shikigami with special abilities need a curse technique for you to conjure them. So because of those limits, in general, each special Shikigami is designed around one theme that the various parts of its body structure can resemble, giving it physical traits that fit the theme and one distinct ability tied to its body. For example, Junpei's Shikigami is a jellyfish with a super flexible body and the ability to poison whoever it stabs. And Megumi's toad is a giant and extra powerful toad, and its main trait is its super strong extendable tongue. So Maharaga's trait is that it can reconjure its body and adjust its structure in the moment in response to whatever it's fighting. Its one key trait takes advantage of how Shikigami are structured for functionality and conjured in the moment to improve its functionality against whatever it's fighting, which makes it the ultimate use of Shikigami Mechanics, because while nobody else can control or change what techniques or ability traits they're born with, Mahoraga can develop natural counters to whatever it fights over time to advance past them, and then there's not much they can do to be a threat again. Mahoraga works because its body is summoned under and as an extension of this wearable wheel. So when the wheel turns, the structure of Mahoraga's body can shift to match the wheel's new design for it. And all the wheel does is float above the wearer's body and analyze whatever the wearer is hit by until it figures out a way to counteract that sort of attack. It's an achievable Shikigami power because logistically, the pieces are simple. It's just that when they're used together, the result is incredibly effective, since again, it allows this Shikigami to grow stronger over time and develop abilities tailored to counter whatever it's fighting on the spot. But there are three big mysteries we don't know about Mahoraga's adaptation. The first is whether you can select what Mahoraga adapts to. As far as we know, you just put on the wheel and the adaptations are automatic from there, unless you pause the wheel with domain amplification so it doesn't register certain attacks, or you slow down adaptation to use more of the 10 Shadows technique, which might make different attacks blur together because the wheel has less time to analyze and reach conclusions in between them. But then again, the user has control over the wheel because they can take it away from Mahoraga and put it on whoever they want. So if they have power over the wheel, and the whole symbolic point of the wheel is that it uses intelligence to guide how Mahoraga's body changes over time, then based on how cursed energy phenomena tend to work, the assumption would be that with enough skill, you could use your own analyses to guide the wheel and override what it chooses to pay attention to or feed it ideas for adaptations. It seems like Sukuna nudges Mahoraga's process while he's focusing on the Shikigami to get it to adapt quicker to infinity. So at the very least, it's likely the user can limit or influence what phenomena the wheel prioritizes trying to analyze. Which would mean, while you or Mahoraga might be getting hit by attacks, you can choose which types of attacks the wheel pays more attention to, and how long it will continue paying attention to them. So which phenomena Mahoraga will adapt to quicker, and how many adaptations it will go through. The second mystery is whether Mahoraga can adapt to multiple phenomena at once. The wheel is able to come up with adaptations faster the more it's hit, like it's getting more training data to work with. But the way it will process that data and come up with an adaptation is unpredictable, because the whole point is you're outsourcing the processing to the wheel so it can do the computations and analyses for you, much faster than you ever could, and free you up to focus on something else. This would suggest that hitting Mahoraga with multiple types of attacks would just have it take them all into account and process all those types of damage as one umbrella phenomenon to adapt to, even if that makes the next stage of adaptation less effective for any single one. On the one hand, Gojo acts as if Mahoraga only started adapting to red after finishing its initial 4-stage adaptation to infinity, even though the wheelbearer was hit by red moments before the adaptation was complete. And even though earlier in the fight, Gojo avoids using red while Mahoraga adapts to infinity, that could just be to avoid the wheel remembering red and then adapting to it after infinity's adaptation is complete. This would make it seem like the wheel only designs adaptations for one phenomenon at a time, or can only register one type of obstacle until it's done adapting to it. But on the other hand, Gojo is only theorizing about how Mahoraga works in that fight, and his 6 eyes let him see the flow of cursed energy. Even ignoring the possibility that Sukuna can control what Mahoraga's adaptation prioritizes, Mahoraga only developed a tolerance to red in phases, so it's possible Mahoraga did already adapt a slight amount to red from that attack against Sukuna. Or the adaptation to infinity was almost complete, so it mostly ignored that attack, and Gojo just read the flow of cursed energy to the wheel to know that. The idea behind adaptation is that the wheel is trying to intelligently analyze something it doesn't know the actual nature of. it's in an ongoing process of analysis, which means its train of thought is inconsistent and its conclusions can vary wildly. And when it's reached a checkpoint, it will turn and apply the change to Mahoraga. But it's not sure if it's done, because all it sees is the data from the attacks. So it will keep trying to analyze the data it has and apply more and more adaptations to Mahoraga's body. It's like the wheel is an artificial intelligence that works through machine learning. It doesn't understand the actual cause of the damage to its wearer. All it reads is the training data, which would be the effects of attacks to the wearer's body or any cursed energy making contact with it. So it's only reading attacks to the body it's hovering over and having to guess what the actual causes are, which would be why receiving more training data to keep its conclusion on track would make the never-ending process reach checkpoints quicker. But this would mean that the wheel never understands the actual phenomenon it's adapting Mahoraga to, which makes sense because phenomenon is a vague term, and unless Mahoraga's adapting to exact recreations of the moment in time it was attacked, there are an endless number of broader phenomena you could categorize any single attack as. And this would mean that if the wheel's wearer is attacked multiple times before the next spin, then most likely the wheel would either try to figure out a solution that would apply to all of them, or separate ways to shift Mahoraga's body to treat them individually, depending on where its train of thought is at in that moment. So it might not treat all attacks equally, because its current draft of analysis could be at any stage, and if it receives a wildly different type of attack when it's almost ready to turn, it might just wrap up the current analysis and either prioritize the exception in the next one or overlook it completely on accident. Based on the ideas behind the wheel, it seems like the wheel's sensitivity to attacks is inconsistent, because what really matters for adaptation is its train of thought that attacks can be a source of information for, but that's only when it's looking for information. And in the Gojo fight, the infinity adaptation was far enough along to focus on. Although if Sukuna could control the wheel, then it could also be explained if the wearer needs to give the wheel a command to start adapting to certain kinds of attacks in the first place. But the last mystery is whether Mahoraga retains its adaptations across summonings, because there are three possibilities. There's the possibility Mahoraga's adaptations reset every time you summon it. There's the possibility Mahoraga's adaptations last as long as you have the 10 shadows. And there's the possibility Mahoraga's adaptations are passed along to every 10 shadows user. I'm assuming it's not the third option, because Shikigami aren't real spirits you're summoning the real bodies of. If there is a Mahoraga spirit somewhere, then similar to the seance technique, it would be more like you're copying its information and making a clone. So Mahoraga's adaptations would only be passed down to every other 10 Shadows user if you're somehow cloning the body of Mahoraga, and then tethering its actual spirit to the version you conjured, and somehow transferring the clone body's changes back to the original spirit. Which is possible, so I do want to put that possibility on the table. But more likely, Mahoraga's adaptations are either temporary or they stick for your technique's version of Mahoraga. The reason they'd be temporary is because the ability revolves around the wheel. We've never seen Mahoraga keep adaptations between summonings of the wheel, and Mahoraga's defeat is signaled by the wheel being destroyed. The wheel might even be the Shikigami's weakness. So given that the idea is you're summoning a malleable body that changes in response to the wheel, it would be more likely that the adaptations reset every time you put the wheel away. But the reason they'd be permanent is because one condition of the 10 Shadows technique is that it forces you to treat the Shikigami you summon as if each of them only has one life. While you can summon and defeat a Shikigami any number of times you want in the taming ritual, it can only be defeated once after you've tamed it, and then you can't summon it anymore. You can even pass the Shikigami's trait onto another one you still have, which will modify that Shikigami's body, because the technique treats the previous Shikigami like a fallen comrade. So whether the adaptations are stored in the wheel or Mahoraga's body, the fact that the technique is keeping track of the states of the bodies of each Shikigami to ensure they each only have one life makes it more likely that the technique keeps track of the changes Mahoraga goes through. Mahoraga is supposed to represent an invisible path forward if you can tame it, after all. So it is a special Shikigami to the technique, and it also still only has one life because otherwise, the technique premise wouldn't hold up as well, and it wouldn't need to simulate Samsara for its ability while it's summoned under the Dharma wheel. So most likely, a tamed Mahoraga retains its adaptations across summonings. But that said, the rule could be flipped if the Mahoraga's untamed. If a tamed Mahoraga retains its adaptations, an untamed Mahoraga might not, to help make the ritual retakeable. And likewise, if a tamed Mahoraga doesn't end up retaining its adaptations, for all we know, an untamed Mahoraga might.